Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues, coming at you with a supplemental follow-up to my Season 2, Episode 8 review discussion video for the Orville's Identity Part 1, which was a mind-blowing episode. It wasn't just mind-blowing for me. It seems like the vast community of Orville fans and sci-fi fans have really found this to be a resonating, just engrossing and mind-blowing episode. And the video itself that I discussed it in has gotten a lot of traction, a lot of comments under it, and there have been a lot of speculations posited as to how this is all going to play out in part 2. Effectively the Kaylons, Isaac's species, taking over the Orville by force and planning to go back to Earth and eradicating mankind because they're out of memory space or whatever it is, as in my estimation, the first stepping stone to the galaxy at large. And so I got a lot of comments and have been going back and forth with a lot of you guys talking about different ideas and speculations as to how this could play out. And I even raised in my own video, the idea that I hope it's not a grand simulation, sort of a holographic thing, or even, as I've talked back and forth with a couple of you guys, a dream state that Isaac may be experiencing. I kind of feel like these notions are somewhat lazy and would kind of be a cop-out to the grand, exalted cliffhanger that we left off with, how much they built up the momentum and all of the twists and turns and reveals. I kind of feel like to have it all be relegated back to just a simulation, whether putting, humanity to the test, whether putting Isaac to the test in some framework, or as I say, some, jiggery-pokery inside Isaac's internal mechanism, to effectively have him dream all of this to see if he's actually, if he finds humanity worthy of saving, and it's all a matter of putting him to the test to see if he'll rebel from his people, that kind of thing. I kind of feel like these are the most predictable outcomes, and thus, I'm hoping the writers, Seth MacFarlane, the writers of the Orville, are smarter than that, than to have it play out that way. Of course, it all remains to be seen for part 2, but as I say, I got a comment in particular that struck out to me in the last couple of hours as of the time of this recording that just blew my mind. A notion that failed to occur to me. And I don't know if this was a notion that occurred to the user who brought it up, or if it was something he or she heard from somewhere else and, whatever like that. But I felt I wanted to give credit where credit was due because of how mind-blowing I found this notion. And it's from the user Raven89F under my episode 8 discussion video, who said, what if this is all a prank? And, a practical joke. And at first, when I first read it, like the first second after I read that comment, I was ready almost to dismiss it as improbable. But just as immediately, I called back in my mind to the episode, to a particular scene where Ed Mercer is talking to like the Kaylon leader, whatever you want to call it, and they raise the concern about how Isaac has been repeatedly humiliated while on board the Orville, conducting his, information gathering and study and whatever like that. They bring up the Mr. Potato Head thing. Ed Mercer counters with, well, he did cut, Gordon's leg off, so it kind of balanced itself out. But it isn't necessarily the first time we've seen humanity, the more human, characters on board the Orville, striking out in that sort of fashion to the unlike, to, in the case of Isaac, an android, to Bortus and things like that. Once again, sort of Bortus was at the butt of Gordon's joke about growing the mustache and everything. At least that's how I interpreted it, and such like that. So we see this repeatedly, time and time again, that the humans are always kind of poking fun at the alien species, at the alien cultures, and whatever like that. And so suddenly this particular comment seems to take on a life of its own. This notion that what if the Kaylons are actually, sort of misinterpreting humor, what a practical joke is, comedy, a prank effectively. What if they're sort of misinterpreting how far you should usually go with that? And that's actually what this all is, to humiliate humanity and show humanity just how much they can be commanded and controlled by another species. You know, you think we're just a bunch of dumb robots. Well, we're going to take over your ship and we're going to eradicate humanity. You know, we're going to bring it all the way back to Earth before, you know, we then stand down and we're like, see, who's the a-hole now? You know, and the thing about it is this seems like something right up the alley of what they might do on a show like the Orville. It does kind of seem like the kind of payoff that, at least especially going back to season 1, I think it would be something more readily that we might have seen. And then there's also the notion that, you know, they have already done, I think the episode was called Firestorm, the whole simulation thing once before with Alara Katan's character. And so they're not going to necessarily repeat themselves. And so I think failing my own sort of speculation and hope and wish for however this is going to culminate, failing that it's all legit and the Kaylons are a legitimate threat that need to be stopped, which might bring about humanity's, you know, creating a temporary alliance with the Krill, or, you know, any number of other things, you know, how it could play out. Failing it being legit, but wholly rather than it being a dream that Isaac might be experiencing, or a simulation to put humanity or Isaac to the test via the Kaylons, I think the most creative and mind-blowing idea for how this could play out is, what if it is an elaborate practical joke on the part of the Kaylons, playing that joke out on humanity, on the Union, and whatever like that. Just to prove the point, we're not a pushover species, you know, but because of how cold and calculating and computerized, mechanized they are, they don't understand that they could get quite a bit too far. As I say, this was a point raised by Raven89F under my video, and when I read that and I thought about it, I was like, you know, that's just about as mind-blowing as this whole episode was, building up, you know, that whole thing to the point where we leave off with that cliffhanger that the Kaylons have taken over the Orville. That's about just as mind-blowing. I mean, we do get hints, you know, in the teaser for the next episode for the second half, that, you know, Kelly at one point is ringleading, and she's like, we all have to band together to fight this. And some part of me really wants to see it legitimately play out that way, that it is a legitimate threat that has to be quelled in some creative fashion, you know, whether they sort of do it Independence Day like, where, you know, somebody inserts a virus and that knocks out the Kaylons all told, or somehow, you know, reprograms them with a worm or something like that. I don't know. I don't know how exactly they would go about it. But part of me feels like the first best estimation for how this could culminate is that it isn't a simulation. It isn't a dream state that Isaac is experiencing. It isn't a grand simulation test that is either, you know, they're testing Isaac's faith in humanity and whether or not humanity is worth saving on his part, or they're testing the Union to see, you know, whether or not everything Isaac has been telling them is actually legitimate, and whatever like that. I feel like the top tier way to have this all play out is that it is legit. It's a legitimate threat that needs to have a stop put to it. Secondarily to that is now this notion, which the more I think about it, the more it's gaining momentum, that this could be an elaborate practical joke, an elaborate prank that they're playing on humanity, on the Planetary Union. And you know, like, I can almost see it now. Guns are blazing, and, you know, they get back to the Kaylon leader, and, you know, here's Kelly with the like a blaster or a laser gun or whatever they call their weapons on the Orville, you know, to the head of the Kaylon leader. And then all of a sudden, all of the red and orange eye lights and all that kind of stuff, they turn blues and greens. And they're like, ha ha, we got you, you know. And I could really legitimately see it playing out that way now that I think of it. With just the aesthetics, the plot aesthetics, the way this show is, and the way it conducts itself. And I think those two scenarios are the least disappointed I would be. The most satisfied I would be is if it's either a legitimate threat or it is a prank gone so far awry, so far and away awry, that it's just mind-numbing and mind-blowing all at once. You know. So I thought I would share that with you guys because I was just mind blown by this notion. I don't know if anyone out there has also speculated along those lines or even entertained that idea, but I had to put it out there because I was suddenly grinning, you know, ear to ear when I read this comment and I thought about it. Thank you, Raven89F, for implanting this idea in my mind, because I got just as excited to come on and talk about it as I was after watching the episode proper. You know, so I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below, or even back on my original video talking about whatever speculations you might have for how this might all culminate, and whether you think things can go back to the status quo, or whether you think they'll be irrevocably changed as a result of what has happened, what has transpired in this Identity two-parter. And I'd like to ask, if you enjoyed this video and would like to consider supporting my channel, please have a look at my PayPal contribution link posted both in the description as well as the comments below. It affords you options very much akin to Patreon, where you can set up a monthly contribution, one-time only kind of thing. You can send me a personal message alongside a contribution, which you can request topics I may discuss in the future, ask for shout-outs, make recommendations of things I might check out, and potentially talk about down the line. And anything you saw fit to send my way would be 2 thumbs up for me, and just secure my longevity on YouTube as a direct line of support to me. And so yeah, until the next one, once again, I'm chomping at the bit to see how this is all going to play out, how it's all going to culminate, and I'll see you then. So otherwise, hope this video finds you well, and I'll catch you all later. Peace.